My mind is alert. My heart is receptive. My next step is here and now. And so it is. Well, you had your joke. So we're just going to get straight on to it today. What is Christ consciousness? Something I ponder a lot, because when I read Ernest Holmes, and he talks about, I know, it's very hot in here. Why don't you open up the doors back there? There you go. Let's get some cool air in here. They heat it up a little much in the morning. When I read Ernest Holmes, and he talks about Christ consciousness, what he's really talking about is a power that was around long before Christ. He's talking about the consciousness that was here, that is infinite from the beginning, and how we use that power. And so Christ comes along, and he recognizes this power, and got lucky enough to be named after it. But in fact, I thought that the words God consciousness actually fitted better. But then I started thinking about it more in terms of, well, if God consciousness is this bigger consciousness, what really is Christ consciousness? And so I started thinking more and more about that. And of course, if we're really going to get a handle on Christ consciousness, one of the best places to do that is the Bible. And so I went and once again started reading the Bible. Started reading, who is this man Christ that we keep calling Christ consciousness, and what is going on around that? And you know, there are certain things that are specific to Christ. Not that they weren't mentioned before him, but he was the one that really took this idea of this power and brought it into a nature in which we could understand it a little bit better. And so here are some of the things I gleaned from reading about Christ. He was very clear about the fact that if somebody hit you on one cheek, do not strike them back, turn the other cheek, and let him hit you again. He was very clear about that, which is why so many of the early Christians are no longer in the gene pool. Because they really tried to live by that. They really wanted to do that. They wanted to say, I will not strike another person. I will be the guy or the woman who turns the other cheek. And many of them got crucified and were proud of it, to be crucified the way Christ was. But he never once was for striking another human being, even in self-defense. And we who talk about Christ consciousness love to forget that part, as long with, however millions of Christians there are who's in the world. But this is what he spoke about. Kindness. Kindness. Instead of striking back, looking for how to be kind. The funniest part about all this for me personally is there's this guy you've heard me talk about before, called Palden Gyatso, tortured by the Chinese for over 30 years, who kept turning the other cheek. He's not even Christian. But he did that for over 30 years. When they stuck a cattle prod in his mouth and took out all his teeth that way, he turned the other cheek. When they put hot irons on the bottom of his feet, he turned the other cheek. And he came out of that experience the most enlightened person on the planet, even according to the Dalai Lama. I mean, you look at this guy, he's so bright-eyed, he's so got it, that his body is irrelevant, that the reality and physicality of this world is irrelevant, that the only thing that's relevant is love. That's what Christ consciousness is. The only thing that matters is love. And every single time we think something else is more important, we are not in Christ consciousness. Now, that's a hard thing to live up to. I'm not so sure I even want to be that way all the time because, there are things about the physical world I actually like. And I'm not so quick to let my gene pool be knocked out of the whole pool thing. So, what are some of the ways in which Christ consciousness can, be applied in a way that makes sense to somebody who wants to stay in their bodies, be in the physicality, and not be so quick to not defend themselves? Because I'm not up here saying you shouldn't defend yourself. I'm just up here stating what is Christ consciousness. And then you got to decide for yourself what about that works for you. I love the Good Samaritan story because here's something we can do. In the Good Samaritan story, a Jew is walking down the road where he's attacked by a thief, beaten, thrown into a ditch, and everything that he had was taken. The Levites, who were the priests at the time, come by, see this man moaning and groaning in a ditch, figure he's a homeless dude, and just keep walking. Some other very high and mighty Jewish people come by and see him down there and actually cross to the other side of the street because they're afraid that this guy who's beaten and, hurting so bad might hurt them. Well, back in those days, the Samaritans were thought of as the dirty people because they married outside the religion. It wasn't that they weren't Jewish. It was simply that they married non-Jewish people, so they were considered dirty. And so in his tale, in Jesus' tale, a parable of the Good Samaritan, it is a Samaritan who comes along, sees him in the ditch, and goes down, helps him, takes him home, and brings him back to health. And the purpose of his story is that it doesn't matter what religion you are. It doesn't matter what faith you are. It doesn't matter what your sexual preference is. It matters the goodness of your heart. That's what matters. Now, there's a Christ consciousness that anyone who is up to can stand up to and live by. Just having a goodness of heart. How about the story of the prodigal son? Another great story. In this story, there are two sons who are the sons of a very rich landowner. And one of the sons, the youngest one, decides he wants to cash out because he's going to go play in the world. And so he's given his part of the inheritance, and he goes off to play in the world, while the older son stays home and works the land and does everything his dad wants of him and is a really good son, while the other son's out there playing and messing around and screwing up, and actually things go very badly for him, and he loses all his money. So he winds up having to come back home with his tail between his legs, expecting his dad to shoot him down. But instead, his dad embraces him. Says, it doesn't matter. I'm just glad you're home. I'm not holding a grudge against what you've done in the past. And so the older son's like, wait a minute, how can you, be so nice to this kid who left when I stood here and do all the work? And the father answers, he's my son too. It doesn't make it not my son because he didn't do what you did. And that's where oneness comes into play. That's where we can look at people who we think have trespassed us, who think have done something, that harmed us, when in fact, that we're all part of the same family. And so, even though I believe that there's really nothing to forgive because we can rise above all that, in the midst of feeling the humanity and emotions that we feel, forgiveness is okay. It's better than not, because it leads to an open heart, leads to us feeling good about ourselves and those around us. Not easy. I don't know how much you guys struggle around forgiving and letting go of grudges in the past. I find that it's because it's become such a priority for me to let go of the trespasses that if I'm feeling at any given moment, that rising gets a little easier by the day. But the practice it takes is enormous because it's so easy to feel trespassed. You know, we have a president who is the greatest teacher we could have possibly imagined. You know, for those of us who agree with him, for those of us who disagree with him, I don't care about that. I care, people vote for president for so many of what I would call the wrong reasons. And what I mean by that is he's not really a guy who can save you. And many people vote for whoever they're voting for president because somehow they think that person can save them, make their economy better, make their lives better. When in fact, all he really is a representative of who we are as a country. He stands for all of us, whether we voted for him or not. And so every time he tweets, it reminds me to be a better person. It does. It brings me back to me. Every time he says something mean about somebody else, it reminds me that I have to stand in that place of kindness and goodness. Because that's our job. He's a great teacher for me because he reminds me so often how I need to stand in my own life. I do not blame him or, put him down or any of those things because he represents all of us. And until we rise as a nation, those who will come forth will represent us in ways that we're not happy with. Until we rise, until each of us becomes who we have come here to be. We will continue to be represented by folks that we look at and go, that's not who I want to be represented by. That's not how I want to be represented in the world. But don't look at him. Look at yourself. This is where Christ consciousness grows. Every single time we want somebody else to change, we have missed an opportunity to change ourselves. And it is in that Christ consciousness that kindness, caring, and remembering we're all family, even those we may consider black sheep, are still family. And that the more we can remember that and be in that oneness and rise together, the more we get to feel that within ourselves. There is a God consciousness that is your birthright. You have that within you, this power, this presence, this ability. Here's one more thing that's really interesting about the Christ. Well, I should finish my thought about that first. You have this God consciousness in you that allows you to rise, that reminds you of your divinity, that has you be an infinite person, that in a finite body, that you will live on forever. This God consciousness is your birthright. But a Christ consciousness is something we must develop. To be kind, to be generous. And that leads me to my last point, which goes back to the book I've been reading by Lynn McTaggart. who states very clearly in her research that those who have had the greatest healings in their lives are those who are not praying for their own healing, but for the healing of others. There is nothing I ever read in the Bible or any other place on Jesus that had him praying for himself. All he did was care and for others. All he did was pray for others. All he did was miracles for others. And in doing so, lifted his own life to the place where there are many on this planet who worship the guy. So I am telling you that healing occurs, and we now have research to back this up, by not praying for yourself, but by praying for others and making sure that in the prayer for others, you embody what it is you are praying for. Because if you embody it, you're healed. So I know that flies in the face of everything we teach in Science of Mind. Get your affirmations and your prayers to have for yourself, to have your life rise up. But it turns out in all the research and in everything I've been able to find that actually that isn't anywhere near as powerful as embodying a prayer you have for others. Because if you embody it, you got it. It's the only thing that makes the prayer for anybody else powerful anyway. When we're sitting here together as a group and we're praying for the county of Los Angeles, we are doing as much for them as we are for ourselves. The deeper we can embody that truth. And so I am all about that. We can embody this, so I am asking you to shift your thinking around what you get and shift it to what you give, what you contribute to life, knowing that in the giving you of course receive, because the only thing you can give is what you have embodied. To give beyond what you have embodied doesn't work for you or anybody else. So you will receive in the embodiment of giving. Does that make sense? That's what we're doing here. That's what our prayers are about. That's why we do what it is we do. Because I notice for myself that the higher I rise to that place of contribution and giving, the lighter my life gets, the more joy I start feeling. That's what's possible, is to embody a sense of joy that is beyond belief, beyond life. And the more I read about Jesus, the more he understood this particular fact, which is why he didn't care so much about his body. And once again, I am not saying to go that far. But I am saying that it is our contribution that our greatest gift of receiving lies. It is in what we give to others, in kindness, in generosity, in love, in caring, that we then receive the greatest gift of all, a sense of joy and love and a magnificence for being here in life. I love you. Thank you. All right. This is a part of our program where one of our congregants gets loved on. Who wants to be that one this week? Come on. Somebody. I know it's somebody's turn out there.
I'll get loved on.
There you go.
Is this what I'm supposed to do?
Yes. You're supposed to stand there and tell us what you want to love on you about.
Well, vibrant health and $1 million for me and everybody.
All right. We need 8 to 10 people up here. There you go. Place a hand on her. There you go. All right, let's all get comfortable. Take a deep breath and relax. And as always, we start within our own hearts, feeling the presence and the love within ourselves. Reaching out to feeling that presence and love in the whole room. And from this place, sending that power and energy to Sandra D. Imagining for her perfect health. Seeing her vibrant, loads of energy, the energy of the universe, flowing through every cell of her body. Knowing for her abundance, $1 million. That abundance flowing in millions. Like Niagara Falls, except in dollars. Flowing through. Feel the health and well-being and this abundance for Sandra D. And I am so grateful for the power and presence of this congregation, this community, as we come together in prayer in this good way, sending this love and light, this healing energy to Sandra D with abundance and care, as we all say together, and so it is. All right, thank you. That's putting our prayer power to work. I like it. Band, come on up. All right. Take out what you're going to give. Hold it in your hand. Doesn't matter whether it's $1, $10, $100, 1,000, 1,000,000. Deeds of property, diamond mines. Whatever you got, we'll take it, but unfold it and hold it in your hand, because this is power, this is presence, this is God. And let's say our affirmation together. God is the source of all supply. Money is God in action. What we give, we receive multiplied abundantly. All that God is, I am, and so it is.